Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning, for those in the Americas, and this afternoon for those in Europe. Welcome to the NewsWhip Pulse. I'm Paul Quigley, the CEO of NewsWhip, and with me is Jim Kennedy, the SVP of Strategy of the Associated Press. Welcome, Jim.
Hello. Thank you.
I love your home office setup.
Yeah, well, I've had 6 months, so I've really tricked it out. It's it's pretty much the same as down on Liberty Street in Manhattan. So I can do just about anything.
It's great. Jim runs the AP single-handedly.
I've also got a backup of NewsWhip, so if it gets boring, I can always switch to
that. The Wizard of Oz of the AP, Jim. So Jim's been with the AP in different strategy roles since 2001. He's helped guide it through many transformative changes, and so I think has a perspective that's really good for anyone in communications and media who's thinking through how to respond to different technology changes, which ones to pay attention to, how to know what to do. It's really exciting to have the AP on, and I should add that they're a NewsWhip investor and have been users of our technology since about 2015. The AP, to say the AP is important to the news ecosystem is kind of an understatement. You know, just like we take running water and electricity for granted, the AP's fact gathering in the news ecosystem kind of does that. I believe 2/3 of the world's news consumers see AP content each day. As always, our motto at the NewsWhip Pulse is speed to insight. So we're going to jump right into some questions and also hold some time for questions at the end. We're going to use the chat function in Zoom for any questions, so please drop those in there. Danielle is going to sort those, and I think you can direct a question to the full chat room anonymously or with your name, and we'll see those then. So Jim, since 2001, a lot of big technology changes. You've been through digital video, AI in journalism, and the advent of social media. Can you walk us through maybe some of the bigger changes and how you knew which technologies you really needed to respond to or adopt in the AP?
Yeah, it's the advantage of being an ancient mariner in the digital space is that I've sailed to every port. So I've actually, been involved from the start. Been doing strategy since 2001, but before that, in the mid-90s, I started the digital news department of the AP. So literally from been involved from the start. And there's been a lot of changes. I think the big breaks have been web, mobile, and social. But there's been one major shift since mobile and social came around. I mean, when we first started building products for the web back in the 90s, we all viewed it. Everybody involved in the news industry had the same feeling about it, that we were building something for incremental viewership or incremental consumption of our content, not something that was going to take over. And so we view it very much as, okay, so there's another media type here, newspapers, radio, television, and now the World Wide Web. And so we treated it as if we could just repurpose things into this new space, and that would be just about it. Of course, it didn't play out that way. And the underlying assumption around that was that our traditional view of how to approach the news, and I think this holds for other people in the information space, even brands who are dealing with the flow of information about their companies, that in the traditional view, the famous saying about trees falling in the forest, and if no one's there to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. And that was literally true. Even in the early digital days, as because websites weren't, and not everybody had a website, not everybody surfed the web, and so you could still say that you could pretty much chart your news course based on what you felt people needed to know and what you knew about what was happening. So the trees falling in the forest that you saw were the ones that you paid attention to. So now what changed? So when mobile, and I call the mobile, the dawn of the real mobile era was around the smartphone introduction. When that came around, and then was quickly followed by the social revolution led by Facebook, you had a totally different situation. So within a very short time of that, let's say, just 10 years ago, it was no longer the case that you could just pay attention to the trees falling in the forest that you were in. You had to pay attention. Every tree in every forest made a sound, and somebody or lots of somebodies were around to capture it and capture that experience. So as a news provider, particularly as a news agency that serves retail outlets around the world like us, our field of view had to open up to a total 360, and we were no longer able to just respond or pursue the stories that we knew about or cared about or wanted to do. We had to respond to everything that was happening and try to make sense of it and try to put it in some kind of perspective and context. So that meant that human beings no longer could handle it. We had to turn to machines, and so since about 2014-15, we've seen several technologies. NewsWhip is certainly one of them, a really important one to us. It's fundamental to how we approach every single day. These new technologies and the machine era, if you will, of digital, the web, mobile, social, now machine era, in this new era, technologies are really important to augment the human work. So in our case, we talk about now augmented journalism, in the sense that the machines are not replacing humans, they're augmenting the work of humans and enabling us to see all of those things that are happening. And in the case of NewsWhip, how they're developing and accelerating in social spaces. And that's a whole new radar system, a whole new set of eyes and ears that we didn't have before. So that's the big difference. I think in the sweep of digital history, that to me is the big fundamental change.
And for others who are here on the call today, who are looking at how to think about their analytics, their tech stack, potentially their use of AI, how do you make those choices? How do you figure out which are the technologies the AP should adopt from the kind of cacophony that comes with any new technological revolution?
Yeah, I think the key for us, and this is the key for us, is that we're in the news business because it's opened up so widely, and because advertising has been disrupted by the platforms, and as a driver in the newspaper business, for instance, has pretty much been eliminated. We have to operate in a lower cost environment. So we're not going to be, we used to be, everybody in the news business used to be able to throw people at an opportunity or a problem. And none of us can do that today. Even the biggest ones out there and the most successful ones out there can't do that any longer. So you've got to find a way to operate in a lower cost environment, because the pie is shrinking. The platforms took out a big chunk of the pie. They took out a big chunk of advertising, the lion's share of advertising. So that changed the business radically for everybody around the world. This is not a U.S. United States phenomenon. This is a worldwide phenomenon. So you got to operate at a lower cost base, and the only way to do that is to find technologies that can that can free up the human beings, the human resources, to do higher quality work. We don't want in the AP, because we got to cover everything, and we got to in the 24/7 around the world and every media type. There's a lot of cool stuff around that, cool stories to cover, but there's a lot of grunt work to do, amazing amount of grunt work to do, and so we've had a war on grunt work since 2014 and 15, and NewsWhip was one of the very first tools we introduced, and it made just a spectacular difference in human resourcing in production. So what we're focused on now, we're focused on 3 areas. We started in production. Let's try to lower the cost of and automate as much as we can in the production area. But now we're focused also on the other 2 pillars, if you will, of the value chain for the AP, which is news gathering in the front end, and then news distribution on the customer end and the consumer end. And we're trying to look at all of those areas, look how we can automate all of that. So in news gathering, for instance, we have automated transcription. In news production, we're looking, in addition to social analytics that NewsWhip has, we have monitoring of crisis management technology, critical event management technologies. We are using versioning and summarization technology to version and summarize text so that humans don't have to rewrite text a million times for the same story. On the distribution end, we're looking at how can we make the distribution of our content more customizable to our customers, so that a big player like the New York Times will get a certain view of the AP, and somebody else in a smaller player or a broadcaster or native digital will get a different view.
That's great. I can imagine people who are in communications, be able to wave a wand and get a few different versions of a statement for different places, and of course everything would need to be checked. But I can imagine that being an intriguing technology.
Yeah, so we've got to make ourselves look like we're adding people, like we're adding armies, when we're really, trying to hold the army together in the status quo of research. We're not cutting. Fortunately, we're not for profit. Everything we make, we reinvest back in the company. We have no debt. We're financially stable, but we don't have a lot of access to growth capital. So we've got to make do with what we have and grow incrementally. We can grow the human resourcing incrementally, but we're really focused on how do we make that human contingent even more powerful than it was in the old days, and that's what we're doing with these technologies.
I think what you're talking about, like using technology as a capability extender, whether it's the analytics that we're providing that help you allocate resources more efficiently, or the AIs that help you do some, the grunt work and sub-editing. I think those are letting the economics drive the technology decisions is a really probably core kind of takeaway. I think if anyone's got any more questions about this, we could come back to it in the last couple of minutes, because I wanted to move to the really contemporary world, or the big now of 2020 for a few questions, Jim, and kind of dwell on that. There's a few topics. There's a lot going on this year. We've got the mono news cycle, social media explosion, polarization of media, revenue challenges, misinformation. We'll see how many of these we can get through. But the first maybe big one is the mono news cycle. It's a terrible name. I'm calling it that. You spotted this phenomenon first and pointed it out to me in 2017. And this is the phenomenon of a single news story kind of dominating everything. And people who work in communications, who are doing pitches, as well as editors who are commissioning and journalists reporting, have felt this huge gravity well of Trump ever since 2017, where it felt like there was just one big story playing out in all these different ways, whether it was Trump and sports and all kinds of things. And if we thought it was bad in 2017, now we're in 2020, where it's another monster story, and we've got the end of sports and the end of a lot of fun other things we used to report on. And it feels like we're just left with coronavirus, the big kind of area of political conflict in the US right now, especially Black Lives Matter and the kind of law and order other side of that coin. And of course, we still have Mr. Trump. So when the world used to have, feels like 1,000 flowers blossoming, different stories, and now you've just got a few big lumps. How does the AP handle that? And what are the implications for media and news production when there's just a few big stories?
Well, to be honest, when I made that observation to you a couple of years ago, it was typically seat of the pants for the moment, and now it's more informed.
Good. Maybe we get a better name than the mono news cycle. I'm sure there's great
since my own observation, I can tee off on it. I think it was a much too simplistic view of the situation. I mean, when we were having that conversation, it was in the context of, well, maybe people don't feel like they need radar screens anymore if there's only one story. And I think we were talking about, the skills going forward for tools like NewsWhip, but in fact, what we discovered with these big stories, Trump being one of them, but now COVID, racial injustice, the election, is that these were never, and they certainly aren't, one-dimensional stories, and they affect everything, and they exert, they trigger winds. If you want to go back and beat up my original metaphor, they trigger winds that blow trees down everywhere, and you cannot escape it, whether you're a news agency trying to cover it all like us, or whether you're an agency representing somebody or a brand that's trying to deal with what's being said. I mean, it's not just what's being said about you, it's what's being said and how it may affect you, and how do you get in position to either defend yourself from something that might or is likely to happen, or that you want to just be a part of. How do you fit yourself into the racial injustice movement, for instance? How do you fit in discussion around polarization? How do you fit into any, pick one of the issues around the election, the campaign and the election? So it's even more important to see all of the activity in the social spaces around these big stories, and let me explain why. The information for the news, the flow of news, is the social currency that we all spend to live our lives, and the mobile social combination has led to an enormous explosion in the flow of that social currency, and it has led to a sort of Gresham's law in the information business, where bad social currency or misinformation is liable to overwhelm or drive out the good money that's in circulation, or the good currency that's in circulation. So this is a phenomenon that is affecting us all, and so you have to be. There's no other way, no other alternative but to play a very, very active role. You can't sit by and watch it all pass you by. You've got to be involved in a reactive and proactive way every single day, every single minute or hour of the day, because you never know what tree is going to fall that's going to trigger something for you. So that's why it's so important, and that's why we need all the tools we can get. We need all the help we can get to be able to navigate through this kind of situation.
Yeah, these stories are just so multidimensional and touch everything. They're sort of the phrase, a multi-strand plot device. It pulls everything into it.
And meanwhile, the other thing too is as you're tied up with all these big stories and the many dimensions that they have, you can be distracted and not see the stuff coming out of left field. So you gotta have something or somebody paying attention to the stuff that's going to clobber you over the head that you didn't expect. We're always, we were having a meeting the other day about the election, and the executive editor said, Dally Busby said to our group, senior management group, that we're prepared for the election, but what we always experience in these situations are sucker punches. Something comes out from a haymaker, comes out from somewhere else that throws your plan off completely. So you got to be ready for those punches, and sometimes you can duck them, but sometimes you're going to have to take them, but you're going to have to absorb them nonetheless. So it's really incumbent on us all to have all the tools at the ready.
And Jim, so we're really we're talking around maybe some of the issues here around polarization as well, or coming to that. So a phenomenon that's accelerated during the Trump presidency is publishers coming more forward really with kind of taking sides. More publishers have clearly broken one way or another in the US. We've seen a kind of a new right-wing media emerge in the US as well. And I listened to a podcast yesterday where an author actually said he's given up on everything, literally all outlets except the AP and Reuters, because they still actually, produce facts. And this is relevant for communicators on the line as well, as brands are kind of pulled into the gravitational well of all of the social and political issues that are at the fore, and often being asked to step up and take stands on things that might have been unthinkable in the past. And making decisions about that stuff is very challenging. And so, it's interesting to see what the AP is doing there. And a good way of imagining why the AP is unique is if Fox News was doing a little piece about NBC, or some news that was an NBC, you just know it's going to be in air quotes. It's going to be like, oh, the Fox commentator will say, oh, we saw on NBC. And the implication will be like, look at these disingenuous fools at NBC. And if you tune into NBC and they're talking about a story that was on Fox, it'll be the same way. It'll only be to kind of deride that story and say, look at these crazy fools over there. But if either of those networks is quoting the AP, it will be with respect. And we checked this, thanks anyway for checking that. Trump has shared AP news stories direct, so has Kamala Harris. Biden probably will at some point. So that's very interesting and almost unique now in the media environment. So first, am I imagining that there is the gravitational pull of identity and politics on media greater than ever before? And how is the AP keeping its position, its unique position in that situation?
I think it's more amplified by the situation we're talking about, by the mobile social phenomenon that's opened up the communication channels and ecosystem full bore. But in fact, it's been a part of our DNA since the literal start of the AP in 1946, when 5 publishers got together to share information from the war in Mexico for very practical reasons. They needed a faster horse than the Pony Express, and so one of the publishers sent his son down to Georgia to find a fast horse, and they could run the news up to the terminus of the telegraph. And so he got the fast horse. He came back to New York and found his father meeting with 4 other publishers, and they decided to share it. And so from the very start, the information that we delivered had to be straightforward, so that 5 publishers could all use it. And those 5 publishers probably all going to take, in that day, and certainly through the early days of newspapers were all, talk about a cacophony of voices. I mean, it was in the heyday of newspapers back in those days. I mean, every newspaper took a certain position, and it was reflected in their copy. So not just in opinion pages. So we had to deliver a very straightforward news report, no matter whether we're talking about a war being prosecuted in Mexico, or whether we're talking about shipping news from Europe, which was also pretty important back in those days. Mm-hmm. So we got into the practical habit of delivering straight facts. And I always say that practical necessity turned into a virtue, and then eventually, 175 years later, it's our brand attribute, and we built a business on it. So now we have a public trust that we're running, not just a company that has a shared fast horse, and it's really important to us to maintain that. So yeah, I mean, we serve all of those people. We serve the far right and the far left and everywhere in between, and they all are using our factual reporting, sometimes straightforwardly, and sometimes to bolster one side or the other of their arguments. But the good thing to remember in all of that, and it's the reason it goes back to my metaphor about social currency, is that at the center of all this, there is a foundation of facts, and we are delivering it. And as much as misinformation tries to overwhelm or drive that foundation of facts out of circulation. We fight that battle every day. And we fight that battle by pursuing the news in a factual way. We fight that battle by pursuing misinformation. We fight that battle by watching the radar screens like NewsWhip and responding to things that are getting out of control, and whacking them down. It's a whack-a-mole thing these days, but because there's so much of it. But it's our duty, and really the essence of business. I mean, we have to maintain that brand attribute, or we don't have a business going forward.
That's inspiring stuff, Jim. I'm very glad that we're, get the privilege of helping you do that. So we've had one audience question come through. We're gonna try and hold things on time. So maybe if you could give us just a brief minute on this, and I wanted to introduce for our audience what we're going to be covering in 2 weeks' time as well. But this question came through: what are your thoughts on fact checking as a genre of journalism? How much faster can it get? The question is the point of it becoming faster, or how do you think about fact checking at the AP?
And, real quickly, it's always been a part of what we do, but it's been a part of what every journalism company does. But up until this day, it hasn't been a sort of a standalone service. Yeah. Now it's a standalone service. We have to sell it, but separately. And in addition to fact checking, the normal fact checking that goes along with every story that we do. So, we're looking for things to knock down, and we're using, tools like NewsWhip to find those biggest examples of misinformation or purposeful bad information to challenge and knock down and label as a fact check. And a lot of people are doing that. There's some individual companies are doing that, and then there's some collaboration. There's a lot of collaboration going on around the world on this subject, as you know.
Yeah, I think the idea that you're outlining of a space where there's only so much attention and facts are getting chased out by bad currency, that's something we'd love to come back to. And then you have the next level problem of facts being misused to serve bad narratives, which is another big problem. Do you have any comment on that, Jim? That's something that's outside of report facts.
Give me that example of QAnon. Taking a story about the Trump administration funding, providing some funding for the victims of human trafficking, and then QAnon using it and passing it through their communities, and presto, it becomes the most shared story on Facebook. And what can you do? Should you put some kind of disclaimer in stories like that? I mean, how could you even anticipate something like that happening? So unfortunately, there's a rearguard action here that has to take place in some of these situations, because you never know how people are going to turn things upside down.
There's plenty of crazy out there. Okay, for Jim, thank you. These have been a really interesting deep dive, and I hope those who are participating today will have a new appreciation for what you do at the AP. Jim, this is a question for the audience, and I'm going to try and share my screen here. You see if you can guess what we're looking at here, and this pertains to what we're going to be covering on next week, or in the Pulse that's in 2 weeks on Friday, the 11th of September. So who are these people, do you think?
These are, well, they're bylines from these organizations, but I'm not sure what you're.
Yeah, so it's totally unfair question. Someone might guess it here who maybe is using our software a lot, but these are the most shared writers in the world. I think in the last week, we sort of do a week kind of a query, and what's very interesting phenomenon that's emerged in the social era is some journalists just having almost bigger reaches than their own publications themselves. And we're about to release some new product features around that, and around finding, understanding in any place very quickly who those journalists are. So for everyone who's here who'd like to do a deep dive, we're going to go into a lot of different sectors and even very contemporary hot topics to see who are the journalists that are connecting the most with audiences and influencing audiences. We're going to be doing that with Ben, who I think many of you will know from the NewsWhip Research Center. But for now, I'll stop sharing my screen.
There you go. I mean, that's something that you could never do before. No human could do that.
It's too much. Very early on, I met an editor at one of the big networks who said, "Yeah, I use that for hiring decisions." So I'm sure it's had all kinds. But like, I think we should talk as well about the second order consequences of paying too much attention, maybe to social influence as a core metric. So we're going to do a real 360 on that topic in 2 weeks. But for now, Jim, it's been awesome having you on. Thank you so much again, and thanks to everyone for taking some time out of your Friday and joining us.
Thank you, and as you always do, call me when you need me.
Cheers, guys. Bye bye. Thanks, Jim.